Welcome to the Book Dormer. Today is April 1st, and you might notice that my books are looking a little weird. Daughter thought it would be hilarious to take and turn all my books around. So now it looks like I'm trying to sell my house. I'm not, but now it kind of looks like that's what's going on. But what else happens on April 1st every year is the Reddit Fantasy Subreddit is releasing their bingo card. So they released the bingo card. As per normal, they released a joke one first thing in the morning, but then by early afternoon, or well, actually by about noon, they had out the real one. And so what it is it's a 5x5 grid, and to win your bingo for the year, what you have to do is read a book that fits in every category. So what we're going to do is we're going to run through those categories, and we'll just take a peek and see what's there. And I have a suggestion for each one. This is what I'm going to try to go for. As quick disclaimer, this is day one. If I pick up a book and it happens to fit one of these categories that isn't what was pre-planned, I might just switch. Right? I mean, that's kind of the fun of being able to do things like this. And really, this is the whole idea, is to try to read something that you normally wouldn't read. Let me get you the rules real fast. I actually have a little printout going here. Yes, I'm analog. I'm old enough for that. Let's see. First off, you can't, it runs from April 1st to March 31st of next year. You can't use the same book more than once on the card. So one square, one book. You may not repeat an author on the card, except if you are doing it for the short story. So there's a short story square you're allowed to repeat there. As long as you're not using a short story collection from just one author for that square. Oh, that's actually an interesting ad. All right, let's see. Only one square can be a reread. Hard mode. So there is not just squares, you can actually hard mode all your squares. So what's the hard mode? It is extra hard, and it's just there for personal glory, I suppose. If you actually complete the bingo card in our fantasy, you'll get a little notification you can add to your account that'll show like you're a reading champion and how many times you've done it. So what we're going to do is just run across. We'll go across rows. We'll do the top row, then move down one and kind of repeat that way. All right, first up, or item one, is first in a series. All right, first book in a series. That's easy. I've got a ton. In fact, the camera is sitting on top of a pile of them, which my daughter turned around those as well. Yeah. But it's the first book in a series. But the hard mode is that it needs to be more than 3 books long. And mind you, we're trying not to reuse authors. So I first thought I was going to go Empire of Silence by Christopher Ruccio, but I think that's sci-fi, and I don't think that's going to count for this. So I'm going to go with one that's kind of a weird, never actually read, which is Stormlight Archives. I've read a lot of Sanderson, but not that series. I don't know. I started the audiobook once while driving somewhere, and it just didn't click. I did not click with me at that point. Maybe I'll go back to it at some point, but I'll definitely, I think right now, the plan is to start the Stormlight Archive in 24. So that'd be a good one to do. And especially since he actually has, I mean, if there's one thing you can know Sanderson's going to do, is going to release books. So that series is going to get finished. All right. The second one is an alliterative title. So read a book where multiple words in the title begin with the same letter. Their example is Legends and Lattes, Storm of Swords, Children of Blood and Bone. But let's go hard mode. Hard mode is the title has 3 words or more that start with the same letter. Well, that would be Liza Locklamora. I've not read it. I was actually hoping to pick up a copy of the Broken Binding version. We'll see if that happens. But if not, there's versions out. And I have a way to get the British ones over if I need to. There's a company that's making amazing looking ones, but they don't sell them to the States, so I can then get rights to the US English. But there's ways. All right, how about Under the Surface? That's the third one. Under the Surface. Read a book where an important setting is either underground or underwater. Now, they did add underground. I actually read this as underwater, which is kind of funny that I completely skipped the whole underground part. And at least hard mode is half the book takes place underground or underwater. What we're seeing, somebody answered this on Reddit a couple years ago, and somebody asked, was a book called Ocean Earth by Alan Dean Foster, where you have Chachel and Glint, a merson, and a cuttlefish that are returning from a shark hunt. And they stumble across an unconscious female demon, as one does. All right, next up is Criminals. I have been waiting for this series. I have it coming. I managed to find a version of Jade City, but in French, and it looks gorgeous. I mean, I've been waiting on this book to arrive. It's supposed to be making its way over. Somehow, somebody in Germany is selling the copies of it. They got them new. Is selling it to the States, so in French. Gotta love this world, right? Now the hard mode is it features a heist, so I'm gonna actually have to read through, and we'll see. We'll see if my French is good enough to know if there's a heist when I get to it. Yeah, things you learn, right? I mean, I expect that one's actually going to be a difficult one to get done in a year. I was hoping Tempest of Tea would have a second version by this point, because that was absolutely a heist novel. It's just I read it I read it earlier this year and not during this. Dreams. Read a book where characters experience dreams, magical or otherwise. Hard mode, the dream is not mystical or unusual, just a dream. And recommendations are coming in for Foundry Side by Robert Jackson Bennett. And considering he wrote my favorite book of 2024, let's go for it. Or at least favorite book so far for 2024. That's your first row across. All right, we're a quarter of the way through. Next round. Our next one, not quarter, 20%, 5 by 5. And I said it's a quarter. Math is hard. All right, entitled Animals. Read a book that has an animal in the title. Mind you, this is fantasy, so it makes it a little harder. The animal in the title does not have to appear in the story. They have examples of the Raven Tower, Wolf Song, A Feast of Crows. But hard mode, the animal in the title is a fantasy or sci-fi creature. They are letting sci-fi in on that one, so you can notice. Which does open up things like Kaiju Preservation Society, Leviathan Wakes. But the one I've been hearing about is Black Griffin by Mercedes Lackey and Larry Dizon. Black Griffin, and apparently actually a character in there. So I'm thinking of going for that one. All right, next up, Bards. Read a book in which the primary protagonist is a bard, musician, poet, or storyteller. Wow, I really should read those more, because I actually have Kings of the Wild right around it's underneath the phone right now. But the hard mode is character is explicitly called a bard, and that's going to catch. All right, so thinking Sing the Four Quarters by Tanya Huff. Nice kind of a side one there. So we'll see about that one. We'll see how far in we get with this. Next up, epilogues and prologues. So read a book that has either a prologue or an epilogue. I mean, I read a lot of fantasy, so that's not so hard. Hard mode, they need to have both. Lord of the Rings. I'm thinking Lord of the Rings. I actually have not read Lord of the Rings. I've seen the movies, obviously. And it's one of those that's such, like, we all know what happens. You've seen it so many times. So you'd be reading it just to almost checkbox it. But I'm thinking that one. All right, next up, self-published or indie publisher. So self-published or published through an indie publisher. If a formerly self-published novel has been picked up by a publisher, it only counts for this challenge if you read it while it was still only self-published. And the hard mode is it has fewer than 100 ratings on Goodreads or an indie publisher that has done an AMA with our fantasy. Wow. That one's, I have a book coming from the UK. I have a lot of books coming from the UK. Sword of Kaigan. And I think I'm going to have to see if it's gotten picked up yet. Hopefully it hasn't gotten picked up yet so I can count, because I'm going to read it one way or the other. It's gotten such great glowing reviews, and the book looks amazing. And we already talked. I prefer hardbacks. I really prefer a good-sized hardback. Now, if hard mode is a wait and see, maybe it's going to be a Gen Con pickup. So I go to Gen Con every year. There's an author's alley. Maybe I'll go around and see who's got a book that's not popular. It needs to have under 100 ratings on Goodreads. Can you imagine going up to the author? Hey, I'd love to buy one of your books, but I want the one no one likes. Or at least the one that's not known yet. That might be a better way to say it. The one that's not yet known. All right, and number 10, the fifth item on the second row, romantasy. The same daughter who did this to me thought that was hilarious when I sent her this. As soon as it came out, I popped her over a copy of the grid, and she's like, "You have to read a romantasy," because she's got a ton. Hard mode is the main character's LGBTQ. Third row, Dark Academia. Well, all right, I do like Dark Academia. I mean, we read Babel. That was definitely Dark Academia. We have kind of we're going to do a Babel video. Both the daughter and I read Babel, so she read my version of it. And we're going to do one to discuss our kind of complicated relationship with that book. We both finished it, so obviously not hated, but we'll see. Let's see, Dark Academia. Read a book that fits the Dark Academia aesthetic. This includes school and university, secret societies, and dark secrets. Does not have to be fantasy, but must be speculative, so they would allow a science fiction Dark Academia. Now I might need to find one of those. Hard mode is the school itself is entirely mundane. Kind of leaning towards If We Were Villains by M.L. Rao. Or Rio, sorry, M.L. Rio. Apologies there. Multi-POV. Oh, man. Read a book with at least 3 points of view. And hard mode is 5, at least. I'm wanting to read it anyways. I'm thinking The Failures by Benjamin Lyer. And if that doesn't get to 5, I thought it got to 5 in some of the reviews I saw. If not, that's where Malazan's going to appear. Because Malazan's like, 5? That's like the first 100 pages. Published in 2024. Well, I pointed out up there, but somebody turn my books backwards. Empire of the Damned by Jay Kristoff. But that's not hard mode. So hard mode, man, I'm gonna have to go looking harder on this one. I didn't think about that. Hard mode is the author's first published novel. Maybe that last one I was just doing there, The Failures by Benjamin Lyer. I think that might be their first book. If it is, haha. That'd actually be a nice little trick. All right, we just slide that one in there. Malazan, the previous one, and we're good. Character with a disability. I just finished my first Joe Abercrombie. If you want to know if I liked it, I bought the next two about 100 pages in. Yeah, so I'm thinking Before They Are Hanged, right? Because the character Glotka, definitely, Inspector Glotka, definitely, he's got massive torture damage, disabilities, kind of the disability that you were created with, or you're forced into it. So it's not a created with, but it's a tortured into it level of smashing. Published in the 90s. This one's hilarious. This is the last of the third row. Published in the 1990s. I bought Assassin's Quest this morning about 20 minutes before this came out. I was waiting for April 1st. And the illustrated edition, it seems to be the one that people like the most. Kind of interesting. There's a lot of people saying they prefer that over the Folio Societies, which Folio Society makes great books. It's just the aesthetics choice, very bright red. So instead, I'm going with the illustrated edition. There you go. That is neat that it showed up. And the hard mode is they have published something in the last 5 years. And Robin Hobb actually has published in the last 5 years. She has a story. Hold up. Where is it at? What Joe Lansdale Means to Me. She wrote that in 2020. That counts. Fourth row. And there are rumors that she's got another thing coming. So there are rumors that she's still going to be publishing. So maybe it'll be not just a story that counts as unpublished, but she's got a full book. Fourth row, orcs, trolls, and goblins, oh my. Read a book featuring orcs, trolls, or goblins. Hard mode as a main character. I have not read Legends and Lattes yet. Boom. 17, a space opera. Read a space opera that features a large cast of characters and has a focus on social dynamics that may be political or personal in nature, set primarily in space or on spaceships. Hard mode is going to be difficult because the hard mode is written by an author of a marginalized gender identity. I don't tend to purposely hunt books based upon the person. What I find, like especially in this one and the next one's author of color, I tend to read those, but I don't tend to search for those, which is a good thing. Right? We're at the point where there's enough people of color getting published that you don't have to go looking for the exception. You can now just look for, this is the book I want. Oh, sweet. It's by somebody who fits these categories. I'm not sure on, well, I mean, other than they're saying marginalized gender identity counts women, which is a lot of authors. And I read a lot of lady authors, and you can see on my list, we're going to have a bunch. But a space opera. I actually bought a book this weekend. We were up in hidden bookstores in Chicago, and I went for a book that I have done on audio. So this would be the reread. I have done on audio, and I hated it on audio, but everyone loves it, and that is Hyperion by Dan Simmons. There is one of the characters on that, I hate their voice. Hate. Every time that character came up, it ruined that section. It's just, that is not the voice I would have done for any character ever. Yeah, it's just funny, right? It's funny how, and it's so personal, right? What voices nag you? Like I was thinking, there's Robert Jackson Bennett has a story out. Love Robert Jackson Bennett's writings, and I love the narrator for this, except for one voice character, and that's the main character in book 2. So I didn't listen to it because I don't want to hear that voice. Just didn't like that one. But the same narrator, right? And the rest of Hyperion, the other characters are just fine. By the way, Hyperion, interesting, right? It's known as kind of the borrowed from Canterbury Tales, which itself, of course, is borrowed from my favorite book of all time, Decameron. Which is, I would show it to you, but she turned them all backwards. Yeah. All right, let's keep moving. Author of color. Read a book by an author of color. Hard mode must be a debut novel published in the last 5 years. Actually, going with The Teller of Small Fortunes by Julie Long. The Rage of Dragons may have counted, but it was published in 2019. And since we're 2024 going into 25 with this, I was figuring that might be at that 5-year mark. So we'll go back after The Teller of Small Fortunes, Julie Long. Looks really cute, fun, and sometimes it's okay to read a fun book, right? I mean, I read a lot of grimdark. I can have some fun books too. Plus, I don't let people tell me what to read. Next up, which is funny for somebody who's doing this challenge off the bingo card, survival. Read a book in which the primary goal of the characters and story focuses on survival. Surviving an apocalypse, surviving a war, surviving high school, etc. Hard mode, no super viruses or pandemics. And I am leaning towards The Black Company by Glenn Cook as being the choice. It is rather than the big leaders of everybody in the war, this is following the soldiers who really, all the soldiers are trying to do at that point is not die. Try to survive. Hopefully your friends survive and get out. So that's their survival, especially when I don't know if they really care about the cause. I mean, when it's go conquer that so I have more territory, that's a rough one to ask you to kill yourself over. Next up, judge a book by its cover. Choose because you like its cover. Hard mode, pick the book based only on the information available on the cover. No reading the blurb. Jeez. Wow. You know what? I think if I did that just walking through the bookstore. Last time we went walking through Barnes and Noble, I think I would have walked out with Bride, which I want to talk about something that's not in my normal wheelhouse of things I read, but it's a great cover. I'm just gonna snag a book at the bookstore. That read a book based on its cover and not based on, and don't read its blurb. Well, you can't really research that. You're just walking through going, and you snag it, bring it in. So who knows on that one? All right, last row. Set in a small town. The primary setting is a small town. Hard mode, the small town can be real or fictional, but the broader setting must be our real world and not a secondary world. Oh, right now I'm leaning towards something wicked comes this way, and I'm gonna have to see Bradbury and see if we're allowed to have Bradbury, or if they're like won't count because it's not fantasy. If it is, man, probably just some like one of the southern horror fantasies. Like there's a bunch of those. Like Sherry Priest had a really good one I liked. There's a bunch of those that are just these little small towns and everything's set there. Like the evil bridge at the end of the road. It's just such a it's funny how it always is certain areas too. All right, it's almost always the South in Appalachia. Like you just don't see evil cornfield that often, other than the Stephen King book. All right, next up is 5 short stories. I'm gonna see if I have an anthology around I never read. I don't know. That I'll just pick up an anthology. Like one of the best blah blah fantasy books of 2024 or fantasy collections, something like that. Yeah, again, I don't have one in particular. The hard mode, by the way, is to read an entire speculative anthology or collection. All right, the next one, you want to talk about one that I thought would be much harder than it turned out to be. I actually found it and already have it coming, which is Eldritch Creatures. So Eldritch Creatures, kind of like the big horror things from Cthulhu, that style. A book featuring a being that is uncanny, unearthly, and weird. This can be a god or a monster from another plane or realm and is usually beyond mortal understanding. Hard mode, the book is not related to Cthulhu or to the Cthulhu mythos. I went with Gunmetal Gods by Zamil Akhtar. Or Akhtar, sorry, Zamil Akhtar. I apparently typoed and wrote it twice, and once not correct. Sorry about that, brother. But Gunmetal Gods looks good. In fact, I had to stop myself. It's sitting on like a late backer thing off the Kickstarter for $65, and I'm like, but I've never read it, and he's got others. It's a trilogy, and if I don't want it, just the good one from one, and then get pot committed, so. But I did get a hardback. 2 to go. Reference materials. Whatever I have that meets this, or what does it say? Reference materials. Read a book that features additional material such as a map, footnotes, glossary, translation guide, dramatic persona, etc. Hard mode. The book contains at least 2 types of this. I think that's like half the books I read. I'm on the bet in the stack sitting underneath this phone right now is one of them. Yeah, I'm on the bet one of those in there has it. So I'm going to see what I have and just pop it in. Maybe I'll turn it around and look and add it in the post edit. That kind of thing. Last one, book club or read along book. Book club or read along. Any past or active R fantasy book clubs count, as well as past or active R fantasy read alongs. And they have their whole list out on R Fantasies. Just read it. Note, all the current book club info can also be found on their Goodreads page. Hard mode, read a current selection of either a book club or read along and participate in the discussion. And so I went peeking at what clubs they have, and they have a feminism and fantasy group. And when you think feminism and fantasy, you think a guy who looks like me. But they have God Killer by Hannah Kaner. And I'd been staring at God Killer. I'd actually been staring at its sequel because Broken Binding has an edition out of book 2. Not book 1. I didn't get book 1, but book 2. So I think what I'll do is pick up the paperback, and if I can't find a copy of God Killer for a reasonable price, Let's pick up the paperback and read it for the first one before the second one shows up. And otherwise, I guess I get to pick and we'll see if they. I don't know if I should go make an account just named Bookdorm and just have a separate Reddit account just for this. That way people are like not outing who I am. All right, folks, that's our bingo. Here's the bingo card. Again, choose, take a look at what you're looking for, and hey, if you want to play along, and let me know how you're doing with it. And it'll be a fun year. All right, this is it'll also take us into March of 25. Ideally, I'd like to have this done in 24. Like that's ideal. Is get that done. But I've got a bunch of other catch-up readings. I think I'd call them like the Robin Hobbs. I really want to get through Farseer at least. And once Malazan is published, I'm still working through the audios. Holy cow, 45 hours. And I'm almost always all I do is I do them while I read or while I walk the dog. And so I walk the dog and listen to them. So a lot of miles get done that way. All right, folks. Thanks for coming, and I'll see you next time.